Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Frame. Now, as you've seen in previous episodes, the team will go through various images captured in different destinations, and in this episode I'm going to be going through a gorilla photo taken in Uganda a few weeks ago. Alright, Uganda, let's talk about the experience first and from a photographic point of view. I often have people asking kind of what gear to take and how do you photograph in the forest. Now, during my time, I've done quite a few gorilla treks and chimpanzee treks, and I always find myself going back to the same kind of gear for these trips. I've used a 400 2.8, I've used a 300 2.8, but my go-to lens has always been a 70 to 200mm lens. Now, the reason for the 2.8 is in the forest, it does get very dark. So you need that sort of 2.8 lens, and even then you're still going to be shooting ISOs of around about 30 to 100, even going up to 4,000. So don't overthink the kind of photographic elements of it. I promise you 70 to 200 is more than enough. You get very close to the chimps and the gorillas, so I wouldn't worry about carrying a big lens like a 400mm lens with you. But without further ado, without talking a little bit too much about the gear, let's get straight into the photos and have a look and see how we're going to process the particular images. Alright, so as you can see, here's a photo that I captured. I'll just view it in full screen. And what I love about this frame is the kind of connection here between mom and the youngster, and then also the big silverback that you can see at the back here. Now, one of the challenges that you face often when photographing these gorillas is because they're so dark, you often have these highlighted areas around. And I often say to people, like, the best way to kind of photograph gorillas is to try and almost fill your frame with the gorillas, just to sort of have the whole frame almost totally black. That will help you from an exposure point of view, and will also eliminate these distracting elements, these really bright areas. So it's actually better if you get the gorillas in a really dark part of the forest. It does make it a little bit easier to expose for. But in this particular case, they moved out of the kind of the dense forest a little bit, and that's why you get these highlighted areas over here. Right, so first of all, what we're going to do, so I shot this in portrait just to try and get a lot more height in the image to include this the silverback in the back. So let's have a look and see if we hit R, how we're going to crop this particular image. So what I want to do is I want to try and eliminate some of these sort of brighter areas over here without losing my gorilla at the back. So I can sort of chop off top of his face, but I kind of want top of his head, sorry, but I want to leave his face in there. Let's just move this across a little bit. Okay, it's just so we can get the baby's face in there as well. So just a slight little crop. Now what I'll always do is I'll start off with my global adjustments first. And what we can do, we can actually drop the overall exposure a little bit, okay? And in this particular case, you'll see you are going to start losing detail on the blacks. Don't worry too much about that, okay? So because the gorillas, they are very dark animals, so don't worry about too much. Let's just bring that up a little bit. Don't worry too much about losing detail on the blacks here. I'm going to bring the highlights down, and you'll see that will affect these sort of areas on the top right of my frame. Bring that down. You see the big difference that's happening there. And then we can maybe lift the shadows. That's going to be sort of this area over here where my gorilla is. Just lift that up a little bit there. Okay. So just by doing that, you can see, look at that sort of area there. It's already softened down quite a bit. Okay, so to do that, I press Y and then Y again to get back to my frame. Now, for this particular image, I'm not going to really sort of lift my whites and my blacks too much, okay, to create contrast. I'm going to maybe lift a bit of the vibrance, okay? And that's about it from a sort of global adjustments point of view. Remember, just because all of these adjustments are here doesn't mean I have to use every single one of them. And you'll actually find with gorillas and chimp editing, you actually don't have to do a hell of a lot. I'm going to go into my masking now, and I'm just going to get a linear gradient just for this area here. Now what I'd like to do is, so if I bring it small, this area, it will kind of go from 100%, the middle would be 50%, and that'll be 0. So it gradually sort of filters down. But what I don't want a 100% adjustment over here, because then it appears pretty obvious, right? So if we drag this quite big, yeah, and then we can move that. So it only starts kind of affecting like a 75 to 50% adjustment on the top here. And let's start off, bring the highlights down a bit. You can even maybe bring some of the exposure down just to sort of darken that area quite a lot. Okay. So really that's starting to look a bit better, and my eyes are not kind of disappearing in these sort of bright areas. Now, what I want to do is I want to sort of lift this area up here, the face of the gorilla, of the mom and the baby. Okay, so we're going to create another mask. I'm going to get a radial gradient, and let's just pull it over mom over here. Okay, somewhere there. Okay, so I don't want to affect kind of those bright areas. I just want the attention to be on the face here. Hit overlay. And what I normally do is I'll start off with my whites. You can see how that face is lighting up quite a bit. Let's start off with the whites. You can maybe do a little bit of the exposure, just a touch. Again, you don't want to go too much and make it too bright. So just small adjustments over there. Okay. And we can also maybe add a bit of texture in her face there. Okay. Something like that. And I'm going to create another mask and kind of do the same sort of thing with the baby's face over here. Okay, so let's just pull that up a bit over the face. And then start off, we'll lift the whites here. And look how that baby's face is popping now. Somewhere there. And I'm also going to add a bit of texture in the face as well. The reason why I don't do this on a global scale is you can see at the top here, I'm already at 3200 ISO. So by lifting the texture globally, you'll actually increase a bit of noise that you often find in these dark areas as well. So I prefer to kind of do more localized adjustments and lift the texture in that department. All right, that already looks pretty good. I might, just to kind of darken it a little bit, let's just see if we can do another radial gradient. I'm going to do a bit of a bigger one now and kind of tilt it around a little bit. Somewhere there. And now I'm going to invert. So just work on the outsides. Okay, let's just bring my feather down a little bit. So I don't want that baby to be affected. Okay, so let's just pull this up, make this a bit bigger. Okay, and then on the outsides of it, we're just going to drop the shadows down a little bit. Maybe bring a touch of the exposure down as well. So this is almost like a kind of a vignette that you're creating. Okay, let's bring that down a little bit more. Okay, so that's starting to look nice. Remember, my story is here in the middle. I love the interaction between mom and the baby. So by darkening these outer areas and lightening up the inside here, we're just kind of bringing our viewer's eyes into the middle of the frame here. Also, the other thing with gorillas is you'll see it's all about the eyes with these guys. So if they look down and not kind of into the light or into the sun, you don't get that sort of that glint in the eyes. In this particular case, I don't feel the need to kind of lighten it up even more, because then it can start looking unnatural pretty quickly. So that starts looking pretty good. Let's just see. I might just get a little brush just for that corner over there at the top right of my frame. Just that area there. Just to sort of bring that down a little bit. Maybe let's start off with the highlights. Just dampen that down a little bit. What you can also do, if you go down into your global panels, and if you go into your color mix over here, you'll see if you work these greens a little bit, and just drop a bit of that, drop some of those colors a little bit, just to give you an idea. There's the bright green, So you just soften that a little bit, that sort of bright green that kind of hits you in the face. Okay, so I just want to soften that down a little bit. Okay, so that, if we look at before and after, see how bright this particular area was, and kind of just sort of dampened that down a little bit over there. Okay, I can maybe, just with the crop, I want to see if I can maybe get that in. This is just being very, very pedantic about this, but kind of want to make sure that it's perfect. Something like that. And then the last thing that I would do is if I go down to my sharpening, I'll hold the Option key. And the masking, remember everything that's white is going to get sharpened. Everything that turns black now is not going to get sharpened anymore. So the idea behind this is you want to have as much of your subject as possible and as little of the background as possible. So I think somewhere about there. That looks good. And then with my sharpening, I normally go around about that sort of, I never go really above 60. There we go. I love that image. For me, that's it's such a special moment. Love the interaction. Love the little baby's face over here. And I mean, these kind of images are actually pretty easy to get when you're tracking the gorillas and when you're viewing them and photographing them. All right, everybody, that's a quick and easy one for this particular episode. Like I mentioned, with when you're photographing gorillas, yes, the gear does play a part. Having a 2.8 lens there is very helpful. Remember that your depth of field becomes very shallow because you're so close to your subject, and you're shooting most of the time at 2.8, maybe at f4 if you're lucky. But kind of keep those kind of things in mind. Look at the sort of the boundaries of your frame, the outskirts of your frame, the corners. Make sure there's no bright elements in there or distracting elements, and have your focus more on your gorilla, often or cropping those bright areas out. I hope that helped. If you guys have any questions, particularly about gorillas or chimps, feel free to get in touch with myself or any of the team. We'll gladly assist, and yeah, happy shooting. Until next time, have a good one. Cheers.